Welcome to the Jewish Drinking Show, the number one podcast for drinking in Jewish wisdom, history, tradition, and more. Welcome to the 102nd episode of the Jewish Drinking Show. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan. I'm very excited to welcome first-time guest of the show, Rabbi Ilan Glazer.
Rabbi Drew, I'm honored to be here with you today. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right. So for those less familiar with Rabbi Glazer, he is the founder and director of Our Jewish Recovery, which exists to uplift the hearts and souls of everyone impacted by addiction in the Jewish community. He is also a freelance recovery, spirituality, and transformation coach based in Baltimore. Rabbi Glazer is the author of In God Created Recovery, Jewish Wisdom to help you break free from your addiction, heal your wounds, and unleash your inner freedom. So welcome to the show, Rabbi Glazer.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So I mentioned, it's part of your bio, that you are the founder and director of Our Jewish Recovery. I've got the website here for anybody watching this. I've got the website up. So if I can, do you mind if I read the about?
Sure, go ahead.
Awesome. So Our Jewish Recovery exists to support Jews in recovery from any and all addictions and their loved ones, and to help us all find experience, strength, and hope. We give voice to the struggles and challenges of addiction and empower one another to continue the recovery journey with its struggles and blessings. We give ourselves permission to find freedom from our addiction, strength along the way, and wisdom and support to live happier, healthy, and holier lives one day at a time. So it's about recovery. It's in the name, recovery. So I have a lot of questions.
Right.
One is, you say Our Jewish Recovery. So how much of this is the Jewish aspects? Like how much is there something distinct about recovery? Is it that the recovery is Jewish, the methods of recovery are Jewish, or it's just recovery for Jews? Like how did you?
A little bit of all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges that many Jews impacted by addiction face is that by and large, and there are definite exceptions to this, by and large, the Jewish world still doesn't talk about addiction all that much. It's one of the issues that I think probably because of shame and stigma and not wanting to speak our, you'll forgive me, schmutz publicly, we generally don't talk about this. And many Jews who are into recovery or searching for recovery end up having to spend time in churches, which are known, many of them, for hosting recovery meetings. Mm-hmm. This makes a lot of Jews uncomfortable, both because of those who say that Jews should never set foot in a church, and also because at the end of many recovery meetings, generally people will stand up, hold hands, bow their heads, and recite the Lord's Prayer together. Mm-hmm. Jews don't generally hold hands in a circle and bow their heads, and we certainly don't generally say the Lord's Prayer together. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Jews are left feeling, is this right for me? Is it kosher for me to be in recovery, even if I have to go to churches? And why doesn't the Jewish community talk about this? And where are my people among my people? Mm-hmm. And about 2.5 years ago, I decided to make this personal cause of mine. I'm in recovery myself, and I was looking around the Jewish world to see where we are, and I didn't find all that many resources. And first I wrote the book, and then I decided to launch the Facebook group. And now it's turned into not just a Facebook community, but really a movement throughout the Jewish community to provide spaces where Jews can be both in recovery and Jewish at the same time and not have to explain what either of those things mean. Often in the recovery world, there's Christian language that comes in, and often the meetings are in churches, and Jews feel alienated by that. But often the Jewish community doesn't know how to talk recovery with people. And we don't generally make our communities welcoming to recovery. And a lot of Jews feel very alienated from the Jewish community for that. And Our Jewish Recovery is what started as my attempt and is now much larger than me, thankfully, to bring the two together, to say, yes, Jewish wisdom can and must be part of our healing journey, and that our core fundamental Jewish story is based on our ancestors leaving slavery and finding freedom together. that was not a one-time experience. Leaving slavery is something that many of us still need to do each and every day.
So can I go back a little bit?
Sure.
Welcoming, you said the Jewish community is not so welcoming or really doesn't know what to do with those in recovery. What are some examples? What are some ways in which that manifests?
So the classic is, I can't tell you how many people have turned to me and said, oh, I went to talk to my rabbi, cantor, synagogue president, Jewish community leader, and I said, my child has a problem with drugs, sex, alcohol, pornography, name your pick, right? And my rabbi said, oh, Jews don't have these problems. And it boggles the mind. Now, I'm a rabbi, you're a rabbi. We know the Jews struggle with all sorts of things, right? We're not this perfect people. We're still people, right? And it really, when we say that we don't have these problems, it both gives us a little bit of pretend moral superiority over the non-Jews who have these problems, because we don't have these problems. But also, when we don't acknowledge that we have these problems, then hey, we've solved the problem because we don't have the problem, so we don't have to solve it.
Yeah. But by the way, I can't. There's in the 1950s, I want to say mid 20th century. There's a commentary, like in the commentary journal, like, oh, the Jews are sober. We don't have this issue. Like,
right.
But I mean, that's one thing to find that 70 years ago. It's another that rabbis in present day are saying that.
Still, too many people say it today. Still, I was in conversations with a community that I will leave nameless recently about coming in to do some programming for them. And the person I was talking to was very cordial and excited to bring this programming in, and went to talk to the powers that be at the synagogue, and then came back to me and said, well, given that nobody is asking us for this kind of programming, we can't justify spending any money on it. And my response is, of course, nobody's asking you for this. You're not talking about this, so people don't think you can be trusted.
Also, they may not think as that institution is a place where they can have those discussions. Maybe they come there for certain reasons, for certain things, and they don't go there for this, this discourse or this talk.
For sure. And my whole point in starting our Jewish recovery is to say that, yes, Jews struggle with addictions and other behaviors too, just like everybody else does. This is part of the human condition. We are no better or worse than anyone else. And that Jewish wisdom can help us. I believe very strongly that Jewish wisdom can help us live better lives. Unfortunately, we don't talk about that so much.
So how do you think Jewish wisdom can speak to this?
How do I think Jewish wisdom can speak to this? I think, so first of all, we have texts going back thousands of years, which show us that people, even in the time of the Talmud, and some could argue even in the time of the Torah, were struggling with alcohol, with illicit sexual relations, with drugs, and with other behavioral challenges, right? So part of it is when we read these texts, we say, oh, I'm not such a foreigner within the Jewish world. This has actually been going on for thousands of years.
So can you provide an example or two? Sure.
You've probably discussed some of these on your show, but I'm sure Pesachim 113a, Rav said to Chia, his son, do not get into the habit of drinking medications lest you develop an addiction. The rabbis will also say when wine enters, intelligence departs. Now they're playing.
I've never heard that translation before. So assuming that we're referencing the same text, it's when wine enters, secrets depart. So secrets come out when the wine enters.
So yes, they say both of them. And yes, it's from Eruvin, and of course they're playing on the gematria, the Jewish numerology that they have. Yain and sod, wine and secrets have the same numerical value.
Right, secrets, but not intelligence.
Well, it depending on how you translate, it's there too.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it up to you. I mean, it's interesting because at that same Erevin section, it also talks about how anybody who can drink a whole bunch and still have their mind settled isn't like they're impressed by that.
Right. And I would rather we not make drinking into a laudable goal.
I'm just saying, if you're going to cite that text, I'm not. If you're going to cite that text, just know there's a context there.
Right, but clearly, either way you want to translate it, when we drink, secrets can come out. Right, it's like our real character can come out, and that's not always a good thing. Right, the rabbis also say, right, that a person's character is known by a couple of different things, including how
Kiso
they hold their
Casa
cup.
Right. Kisi Casa Koso. Right. It's in that section also. Right. So, and that makes it very subjective to the person.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Right. Everything is subjective not everything, but most things are subjective in Jewish tradition, and certainly in the recovery world as well.
Well,
right?
What we were just talking about, whether it's the Nichnasing Yatzasod, when secrets come out, or when it's, how can someone handle their liquor, the Kiso Casa Koso aspect of the very subjective nature of who someone can be recognized by. These are very subjective.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think it speaks clearly the rabbis enjoyed their alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for those who can drink alcohol safely, responsibly, and without destroying their own health, great. I don't have a problem with that.
Right. I would say usually. I mean, there are exceptions. I mean, we also see, I think it's in Pesachim where one of the rabbis, like, he drank like for the Seder, and then for like weeks and weeks and weeks, he had a headache from it.
Right. We have that one. We've also got a great story in Megillah where, Rabbah and Rabbi Zera get drunk, and Rabbah slaughters Rabbi Zera accidentally because he was so intoxicated on Purim.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully is able to magically revive him. Right. I think the rabbis did understand that there is such a thing as too much. Unfortunately, in the Jewish world today,
it's a mix.
Right. Not everybody knows that there is such a thing as too much.
Right.
And when
I just want to say it's a little bit it's a little bit grayer, I think. I want to complicate it.
Sure.
Okay. I'm just saying it's kind of gray. I think we can both agree on that. There's lots of grayness here.
For sure.
It's easy to go black and white, but there's a lot of gray involved.
I hope you've been enjoying this episode so far with Rabbi Ilan Glazer. If you're interested in not only recovery, but also addiction awareness, here's a sneak peek into next week's episode featuring Marla Kaufman.
For the Jewish community, there's a myth that needs to be dispelled, which is that this particular, malady, this particular illness doesn't affect us in the numbers that it does other groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not the case. And it keeps people in shame and stigma and silence.
Hope you enjoy that sneak peek into next week's episode featuring Marla Kaufman. And now back into this episode featuring Rabbi Ilan Glazer.
I think that everyone needs to decide what's healthy for them and what's responsible for them. Yes. I'm not here to tell anyone that they should never drink a drop of alcohol again. First of all, nobody would listen to me if I said it. And second of all, again, for people who don't have challenges with it, that's fine, right? What I want is a Jewish community that recognizes that other people struggle with drinking alcohol, and that when we have so much alcohol throughout seemingly every Jewish holiday, I know not every Jewish holiday, but most of them, right? When the cool kids are drinking l'chaims at shul every week, it sends a message that everybody who's not in that room is not cool. Right? And our kids are watching and learning that drinking is cool. And we know that when our kids think drinking is cool, they drink.
Yes. And I think I hear some resonances of some previous episodes. What you're just now directly referencing, it seems like the Dr. Press Schwartz episode on teenagers binge drinking. I'm also curious to hear, we were talking about recovery, right? And having those conversations, and we were,
sure.
And I know you referenced a very shocking, surprising rabbinic response of like, oh, Jews don't have problems. But we did have Rabbi Andy Kosnowski on a previous episode to talk about these similar issues, and certainly vis-a-vis clergy. So do you have any, certainly in thinking about making these things available, maybe alternatives, how do we have this in Jewish life? I don't know if you wanted to share some of your thoughts on or build off of those aspects.
Sure. So I listened to Rabbi Kosnowski's episode and grateful for her wisdom there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are quite a few things that the Jewish community can do. I think we can be better at, do we have Jewish recovery texts in the synagogue library and in the sanctuaries, right? Do we make space in synagogues for recovery meetings? Do we have rabbis and educators who are willing to say publicly that not everybody should be drinking and that it's a mitzvah for a lot of people, for all of us, to take care of ourselves, and that we don't need to have the shame and the stigma about admitting our challenges, right? Some communities have hosted a sober Seder. Some have hosted a sober Shabbat event and have speakers from the recovery world. Right? I think it behooves us all to get educated to know who is struggling in our midst and how we can help them. And again, I don't need everyone to change. I don't expect every rabbi or cantor or Jewish day school principal to, suddenly throw open their doors and go to recovery conferences to learn everything. I wouldn't object if that happened, of course. Right? But I think given how much we talk about healing the world, we have to heal ourselves. And there are so many within our community who are struggling and looking for places where they can feel connected to Jewish life. I'd really love to see more Jewish educators speak about that. Now, Rabbi Andy said something very interesting.
Yeah.
She said,
I used to schlep back from Chicago to Cincinnati to actually speak to the graduating class at Hebrew Union College of rabbinical students. One of the things that I used to teach about was we clergy cannot help alcoholics as clergy. That if you get a congregant that comes to you that has a problem with alcohol and or drug addiction, the clergy cannot help them. They can set them up with other members who have recovered from alcoholism, but we can't help them as just people. Alcoholics that are not treated take a tremendous amount of resources. So I always encourage rabbis, cantors, people who want to be aligned with those who are addicts to educate themselves about the resources that exist to be able to help alcoholics find the help that they need. That really the people who can help alcoholics are other alcoholics. So we have to set them up with places that they can find other alcoholics to find a solution for them. That we can't apply Jewish teaching that will cure alcoholism. It's sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm. It looks like you're helping, but it's not doing so much.
and she's right to an extent.
Yeah.
Right? If someone is drinking all the time, that's not something the rabbi is going to fix. This person needs medication. They might need rehab. They need treatment. They need recovery support services like coaches and mentors, right? For sure, that's not something that most rabbis are qualified to even think about, let alone to treat, right? That said, rabbis who are willing to sit and learn and process and help people grow spiritually can provide an invaluable service to those members of their community. And Rabbi Andy mentioned, she said, it takes a lot of time to work with people who are suffering like this. And she's correct. She's totally correct. It takes a lot of time to work with people who are really struggling.
Yeah. Wow.
But isn't that something we should be doing?
And I would imagine, especially if you're able to use it within a Jew, it help them in a Jewish context or with Jewish discourses, is even more powerful. Right?
Correct.
But that sounds a little bit more specialized, like what you do.
For sure.
Right.
I would love for every rabbi to be able to say, here are, 12 different Jewish recovery books that I can recommend, and you can borrow one from my library today and start reading. And here are websites and Facebook groups and other Jewish resources for you.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, people have to struggle to find it on their own. And that's hard for a lot of people. When you're not in a great place in life and you turn to your rabbi and your rabbi says, I can't help you. Doesn't open the door for a lot of healthy communication to follow.
Have you found that whether from rabbis or from just non-rabbis, just Jews looking for help, whether someone struggling with addiction themselves or family members, have you found that people just don't even know where to look, or is it like you were mentioning some rabbis say I really don't know, and it sounds like even just being knowledgeable about where to share, have resources, or you might want to look at X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Most people originally don't know where to go. When I got myself into recovery 7 years ago, I started looking around the Jewish community. I went to Rabbi Google, of course, and I tried to see what was out there. And Beit Tshuva in LA does a great amount of work they're an inpatient Jewish rehab facility. They do fabulous work, but if you're not there in LA, they're not trying to be a national movement or anything. There are a couple other organizations that have emerged. Most of them are pretty small, and no one was really trying to unite everyone and to say, hey, let's have conversations together. Why can't it be that the 10 people we know about in your show and the 12 people in your show and the 30 in your show, let's all come together and have conversations and feel like we have connection and community. And that's a lot of what I and our Jewish recovery have been trying to do.
That people are looking for that connection and community, right?
For sure. Addiction is often a disease of isolation and disconnection. It's a sense of being alone. And what most people don't understand about addiction is that addiction is actually, in its own way, a solution to a problem. The problem is, I don't know how to be alone with myself. I hate myself. I can't stand the thoughts that I think. I worry about everything. And I just don't know how to deal with the emotional anguish that I'm in.
So it's either self-soothing or a way of just trying to ignore, right? Yeah. Mostly
it's a desire to numb, to say, I don't want to have to feel this pain that I'm in. There's a saying that says, drinking is not the answer, but when I drink, at least I forget the question. Which makes sense to me. The problem is, A, if you drink too much, it will significantly damage your life and your physical being. But B, it also doesn't actually address any of the underlying issues. And recovery is about A, stopping the things that are preventing you from living healthfully, and B, giving you better answers to the questions you've been unable to answer for so long.
Wow.
And we have to do that together, because left to our own devices, we try to numb. It's hard work to think about these things all the time.
Yeah, for sure. That's really helpful and powerful insight.
Hey there, I wanted to see how you're enjoying the episode so far. If you have any feedback, comments, questions, anything, please let me know. And also, if you have topics as well as potential guests, including, who knows, maybe yourself, please let me know. Feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. Thank you, and now back into the show.
I was fighting you on some of those rabbinic texts. I'm very passionate about them, so I
don't claim to be a Talmudic scholar, but I have seen it translated that way.
Okay, well, I'm going to share something with you. We're not the only rabbis to fight over these, so
I'm shocked, positively shocked.
Rabbis disagreeing about rabbinic texts? Never. It's never happened. Rabbis always agree. So, but setting that aside, I think one thing that we can incredibly agree upon, you and me, and is that these topics, almost anything around drinking, whether it's addiction or even just drinking, a lot of people don't even want to touch with a 20-foot pole.
Right.
And it is like, I mean, granted, what you're saying, it's nice to have a little bit of kiddish or whatever, but like for people to have a drinking program, oh no, we don't want to deal with that. And I think even also for addiction and these matters, it's uncomfortable. I think that's also a broader cultural, like in America, like we don't really want to talk about these things. And I think we as American Jews, I mean, that also, filters down to us, like that is our broader cultural context, and that people don't really want to talk about these things. It makes us uncomfortable. But I think you and I both agree that having, knowing what to do, knowing what's going on can help people rather than just trying to ignore them or otherwise sweep them under the rug.
Many
Yes or
people
yes?
Agreed completely.
Okay.
1,000% yes.
Okay.
And we have to be willing to have brave, vulnerable conversations, because that's where authenticity, that's where healing really takes place.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a culture that says, buy this, eat this, drink this, and all of your problems will go away. And the people who tell us those messages make hundreds of millions of dollars every year selling us things that we don't actually need. It's a great business model for them, I guess. My question is, are we drinking alcohol because we really love to have a glass of wine and it helps us get into the spirit of Shabbat, and we can do so safely and responsibly? Great. I don't have a problem with that. Are we drinking wine because wine has become our closest companion? Are we drinking wine because it allows us to stop thinking about everything else? For me, it's a question of, Rabbi Steinsaltz was asked about marijuana, and he said, it depends who is the master and who is the slave. Right? Are we able to master our emotions and the amount that we take in? Maybe yes, maybe no.
That's a really powerful insight.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. I want to break in again, and if you have ideas beyond the show, beyond the podcast, beyond this video content, if you have ideas for what Jewish drinking can bring you, whether it's, who knows, maybe it's Zoom sessions, maybe it's events, maybe, who knows, swag, please let me know. I'm very curious to hear from you any ideas, things that we can do, things that I can bring you from Jewish drinking. So feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. I'm happy to bring that to you. All right, now back into the show.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, way earlier in the episode about,
Sure.
I guess the typical AA stuff about the Lord's Prayer and these things. So how do you deal with that? Like, do you have a as like a Jewish version of AA or 12 steps, or is it a total, like, how do you deal with that?
It's a good question. There is a Buddhist recovery program. There are Christian recovery programs. I suspect there will never be a Jewish recovery program because, as you said, rabbis will never agree on anything. And even, what do we call it? And which text from the Talmud do we bring? And, which, Kabbalistic sphere are we in today? We're never going to agree on that, which is fine. We, at the meetings that we host, we don't say the Lord's Prayer, even though in the original Aramaic written and said by a Jew, it's actually fairly okay, but sounds pretty not okay when said in a church together, right? It makes a lot of Jews deeply uncomfortable. So we don't do that. We bring Jewish teachings. We study them. We do study the Jewish recovery literature. There are probably a dozen or two books out there, and we study those together. We sometimes celebrate Shabbat and holidays together. We study, not everyone, of course, but like we offer opportunities. We bring in a lot of Musar texts. We bring in Jewish spirituality texts and classes, and people love that. In our meetings themselves, on some level, a recovery meeting is a recovery meeting. On the other hand, just by the nature of there are Jews using Jewish words in it, the tone shifts a little bit. B, also, we do 2 virtual Jewish recovery retreats every year. God willing, we'll add in-person ones when the pandemic allows us to. But we did our first retreat before Pesach, and we talked about the connections between recovery and slavery and freedom, of which there are many, right? It's a story that's a connection that's totally easy and right there for us. We did our second retreat before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it is like the work of recovery, whether it's with the 12 steps or a different recovery path. This is the work of tshuva. Right? We talk every year and we say, oh, we should do tshuva from our sins. And most people don't really know what the sins are and don't really know what doing tshuva is. And recovery is one path that allows us to do real practical tshuva in our lives. And when we take ownership of our lives, when we make those amends to people, we are writing a new chapter of our story. And we are freeing ourselves from some of the emotional burden that we carry. And if we can stop holding on so tightly to the pain of our past and also be filled with insight and spiritual nourishment in the present, then our future can be much better than it had ever been. That's the hope.
Good. That's good.
What I most want to say is that A, this is a Jewish problem too. And we should help our people. And this is not a new Jewish problem. And it's a mitzvah to take care of our souls. Right? The rabbis wonder, is it a positive mitzvah to take care of our bodies? And they decide yes. Right? Deuteronomy says, "V'nishmartem me'od lenafshotechem," we should guard our souls very well. Right? And they say it's a positive mitzvah to take care of ourselves. I think for me, recovery itself is a mitzvah. Right? Now, this might be expanding a little bit. I'm not an Orthodox rabbi. I don't pretend to be, right? But expanding on how we say what mitzvah is, I think all of the work people do to go to recovery meetings, to work the steps, to help other people, to connect and create safe spaces for Jews in recovery, this is a great service. This is a mitzvah that we're doing for our people today.
I thought you could have gone in the route of saying it's teshuvah.
That too.
That's good. Yeah, I think that would be a lot simpler. Just like it's a way of a physical and from what you're describing, also like a mental, emotional, spiritual teshuvah as well.
1,000%, 1,000%. Right? They say that in recovery, you only have to change one thing, which is everything. Right? We really have to leave our unhealthy patterns. We have to leave our slaveries behind. We have to be willing to ask ourselves, where am I still stuck? And how can I get free? And if I can find other people who've gone on this journey of healing, who are willing to show me the way, great. Let me tag on to them and learn from them. And that's what recovery is all about. And thank God. Now, not everybody, it's not an easy process. And a lot of people get scared because transformation is hard. But what I know at the core of my soul is that people who are willing to learn a new way, people who are willing to connect to the best parts of themselves, people who are willing to allow themselves to heal, these are people who should be celebrated within our community. So often, right? We celebrate the people who give the money for the buildings, and we should. God bless them. We need them to do so, right? We celebrate people for speaking up about Israel and anti-Semitism and the other causes we talk about. I also want us to celebrate people who've really used the best of Jewish tradition and recovery to change their lives, right? This is inspiring to me. And so most people think about addiction, they think about pain, and they think about trauma, and that's all there. But I also think about hope. And this is a movement that so many are on now, creating hope and a better way forward. And in a time when so many are suffering during the pandemic, and we know suicides are up and overdoses have skyrocketed and alcohol usage has skyrocketed and domestic violence is up and unemployment and poverty and everything else. Do we have the courage as a community to lift up the people who are making their lives better and spreading healing to others? I think if we did that, more people would find the healing they need.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. All right. Well, Rabbi Glazer, thank you so much. This is very insightful. I hope it sounds like hopefully people will find this helpful as well. Before we conclude, is there anything you would like to promote or share with our listeners?
Well, I'll share with people that anyone who feels like they want to be part of the work of Our Jewish Recovery, there are a couple places to find us. You can find us on the website, ourjewishrecovery.com. You can also join our private Facebook community. We just have over 900 members now. We'd love to have even more. We'd love to have you be a part of our meetings, classes, Torah study from a recovery lens, retreats, spiritual journeys, all sorts of fun things that we're doing, concerts and movies and book studies and all sorts of great stuff. And we, God willing, are going to continue growing and immersing and meshing ourselves throughout the Jewish community so that anyone who's struggling can find the healing they need. We do have additional resources. Feel free to search in the Facebook group. Those who want it, my book is available via our website as well. And it's my attempt to go through the 12 steps of recovery and connect them to Jewish teachings and to see where we need to adapt and where the steps can really help us. And anyone who wants to read it, I'd be honored, of course. And anyone who's feeling like they need help going through any addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography, love addiction, codependency, gambling, anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to connect you with resources and people who can help you. No one needs to suffer alone. There are people, there are ways that you can move forward. So if that's any of your listeners, please do reach out to me privately or through the Facebook group. We'd love to get you the healing that we all deserve.
Awesome. All right. Well, Rabbi Glazer, thank you so much. This has been great. And l'chaim.
Chaim, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.